Hello, 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 everyone. I'm Afro Butterfly. This is Digital Green Book. As you know, I love to bring amazing people to this platform and just chat about some of the things that they do so I can broadcast to people who are watching that there's other things that you may consider doing in this lifetime. I've come across so many amazing people in my journeys. Uh, I met David Charlot at Black Tech Week in Cincinnati, and I was absolutely fascinated by what he does. This young man is so brilliant, very decorated with his degrees, all in the bioengineering field. And I'm so excited for you to be here to discuss how what you do intersects with technology. Thank you, David, for being here today.
Yep, thanks for having me. And it was also great meeting you at the culture shifting weekend in Miami first,
That
and then also running into you again uh, um, at the tech conference and it was in Cincinnati. Yeah, I
yeah.
always forget. It was my first time in Ohio, so I always forget which is the city name. I was about to say Columbus, but I'm like, oh no, that's a different city.
Right. Right. And you know what? I go to so many events now that it's like, I have to keep a Rolodex of where I'm meeting people at. But it was so amazing meeting you. Culture Shift was so fun. Oh my God, I met so many people that day. But I really wanted to highlight you because I think it's very necessary, especially for our community, to show young Black boys and young Black girls that there's some really cool things that you can do intersecting science and tech. So I'd really love to get down into the nitty gritty of what you do. But first, let's talk about how you wound up where you are now. Did you always have an interest in science and tech when you were a child?
Oh, I'm one of these kids that was able to do well in all the classes, and I actually got my main interest in working in the field of bioengineering, where I currently work, because I learned of a silly problem in at least the United States of America that it doesn't happen as frequently in other countries, and
Mm,
it's related to my dad's job. He was in the United States Air Force, and I lived on military base. So whenever he had a different job, orders, he moved to a different location. Me and my family went with him, and I was always on base, so I only know, there's military bases around, and I lived on base. It sounds me strange me repeating it, but what I'm trying to say is I grew up in a sheltered environment because on base it's fenced in, and stuff that's on base I didn't actually know was not off base. And in this
mm,
particular example, healthcare. I hurt my knee playing basketball in undergraduate. It's a nice pickup game, but I hurt my knee. And one of my buddies from the Bronx, he said, "Hey man, hopefully you have good insurance. Otherwise, they're not going to take care of you." I was a freshman in college when this happened.
mm,
I was studying economics actually as my degree,
mm,
and when I heard him say that, I said, "Why would I need insurance? I'm not like a car. I know about car insurance or house insurance." When like
mm,
I just go to the base hospital when they see me. I show my ID. What are you talking about? He's like, "What?" And then I learned at this particular moment that healthcare, it's not a freely distributed commodity, and depending on your economic situation, your
mm.
geography, where you're actually located, that actually influences the type of care you receive. And I think that's extremely absurd. So, changed my major to physics, got a PhD in bioengineering to really help with this one thing. Technology drives down the cost of everything. So, making technologies that could solve problems that plague human health will eventually make them available and accessible. And so that's how I get into what I do.
I think
All
that's so amazing and very considerate of you, especially as you know, my background did ICU nursing for 13 years. And it's what you touched on is so true even now in 2022 in a first world country. Healthcare is not equal for everyone and it
Yep,
may not be affordable for everyone. So I think that's very selfless of you to make that your life's work to make healthcare accessible for everybody. So thank
yep.
you for
And
that.
yeah, I was gonna say before you give me too many accolades, it's for a very selfish reason that I'm doing it. Actually, I learned I learned in my world regions class when I was in sixth grade. I was in
Mm,
Stuttgart, Germany, on Patch Barracks base in the classroom, and I learned about the bubonic plague. This is, of course, it wiped out pretty much uh, one quarter of the human population at that time, and it was all because of a bacteria, one bacteria that wiped out so many people. They didn't have cleanliness. They didn't have certain types of ways to mitigate the bacteria back then. But the most important thing, so when you learn about this, is uh, it doesn't matter your wealth, what you look like, what languages you speak. You could die just the same, and you could also get get disease from other people despite what they look like and sound like. So it's almost like it's my selfish interest to be well, so I have to make sure you're well because you
Hmm.
can get sick.
This is true. So, how would you say your everyday work now, specifically with what you do? What are some of the things you investigate in your day to day work?
So what I currently work on with a company that I work at, it's actually antimicrobial resistance, quite specifically. These are bacteria that are losing that they've already lost, or they're losing their susceptibility to the treatments that we have, like our antibiotics. So, of course, if you watch the news, it doesn't skip a headline if you're paying attention. We had something called SARS-CoV-2, which is a virus. It came and got involved in people, and people were dying because of this a virus. We had some medical innovation come out. Some vaccines were created, and people take the vaccine, and they're able to ward off getting the virus or having any negative symptoms. But now, as you are hearing the news, it's saying, oh, well, you have to get the new vaccine. You got to get boosted again because this virus, it's altering and it's becoming less and less. The vaccines that were made are less and less effective against this very naturally occurring thing. So I always like to remind people, as I am a scientist, there's one thing to observe the world around us, understand with big air quotes how it works, and come up with solutions to try to deal with it. It's
Mm.
another thing to know that we didn't actually make the world around us, and really a lot of what we're doing is experiencing and trying to find ways to live in harmony with the world around us and make sure it doesn't kill us or we kill it, right? And
Yeah.
so, uh, going back to this antimicrobial resistance point, I learned in 2016 there was a World Health Organization report that came out that
Hmm.
specifically is talking about antimicrobial resistance. And for again, layperson kind of thing, I'm talking about E. coli. It's a bacteria. Staph aureus. That's a bacteria.
We
There's
already.
different Yeah, there's different strains of these types of bacteria. In the case of Staph aureus, there's a superbug reference, MRSA, which stands for methicillin-resistant Staph aureus. It's like, oh my God, what does that mean? It just broke it down simply. Methicillin is a type of treatment. It's an antibiotic that is used as you have a staph infection. It's commonly recognized to say, okay, give them methicillin. It should treat it. So as you're taking that antibiotic, if your symptoms continue to get worse, what the doctor who's treating you understands immediately is the type of staph you have is not responding to the antibiotic that they gave you, and therefore that means they may not have something that can kill that bacteria. So they have to do testing to identify what is the best mechanism that can be used. And so what I do is, now getting to the nitty gritty, I make uh, diagnostic equipment that characterizes the interaction between drugs like methicillin or different types of bacteria killing materials like there's antimicrobial polymers. Just think about like the clothes you're wearing. It's made out of some kind of a cloth. Those
Hmm.
are, you could say, are polymers like string. There are people working on polymeric drugs that you'll take in, and it'll go to the bacteria and it will interact with the bacteria in a way that makes that bacteria no longer viable for duplicating and causing a problem in your body. The interactions have to be characterized. There's also there are also viruses that kill bacteria. They're called bacteriophage, and they literally are, like, coronavirus is killing humans. It's bad for humans. There are some viruses that they won't do anything to humans, but if it comes across a bacteria that it doesn't like, it'll really mess it up. It's like war. And so people are looking at all these different types of treatment options to neutralize bacteria. and I make instrumentation to study that interaction to make sure it works. In the industry, it's called characterizing cytopathic effects, and that's
Mm-hmm.
in order to do that very well, you have to have good measuring tools. So just think about, I mean, right now you see my face. There's a camera recording me. You hear my voice. I'm being measured by this camera. But I'm not being analyzed. But what I use to do this work is I use cameras, I use
Mm-hmm.
computers, I use software to analyze the images, understand how the bacteria are changing in the behavior. So that's at a high level what I do. Very exciting, and it's of course for an important cause because we don't want the bacteria to win, because if they do, then there's more of them, so they could really take us out. So we've got to make sure we live in harmony with them.
What would you say is the first way when you left school that you sort of headed towards that sort of field where you're so deeply studying viruses and bacteria?
Oh, I kind of got lucky and fell into the space. So my undergrad degree, I mentioned I switched from economics to physics.
Mhm.
When I was in my physics program, I joined well, uh, uh, my professor, Dr. Helmy, she introduced me to this a program. It's called MARC, which stands for Minority Access to Research Careers. She said, she used to call me Charlot, not David. She said, Charlot, uh, let me introduce you to this program that you can unlock the world, and you can use the physics that you're learning here at Delaware State University. It's a historically black college university in Dover, Delaware. She said
Mm.
you can unlock your physics and do anything. So I signed up and was accepted into the program. And what I had to do for the program is every summer I had to do a summer internship at a research location called a research experience for undergraduates. So
Mm.
for my first experience, I did research at a national laboratory in Newport News, Virginia, called
Mm.
Thomas Jefferson National Lab. And for that experience, I got exposed to lasers and the power of using lasers.
Mm.
It sounds strange for me to say get exposed to lasers because everybody's probably used a laser pointer or something like that. I wasn't working on that type of laser. I was working on, mind you, I'm aging myself. This is in 2002.
Mm.
I was working on 2003. Sorry, I was working on a free electron laser, which at the time is
Mm.
the brightest light source in the world. They accelerate an electron at insane speeds, and because of the speed at which it's accelerating, it generates. It's running into different types of uh, uh, um, objects like gas particles, and the interactions cause really really bright lights to be created. And so the project
Mm.
that I was exposed to was using this bright light source to do laser welding. uh, and
Mm.
so you have a car or anything like any big mechanical structure, there's going to be some steel I-beam or something, and we use welding to fuse metals together.
Mhm.
Not to get too boring on this, it's like uh, the, if you just put two pieces of metal together, like take two knives, they're not going to stick to each other. But if you warm those up really hot, you'll cause the metal to flow, and when it cools down, then you can have the two knives sticking together, right? Sounds great,
Mhm.
but there's big issues associated with that process of heating up and then cooling down, where the material itself can become brittle. So the research group I was working with, they were trying to find ways to fuse metal together much faster to prevent the propagation of the heat too far in to where the weld is going to happen, so that you don't have the weld eventually break because the material's been compromised too much. So I was like,
Right.
that's really cool. That's what I learned from my first research experience. This has nothing to do with what I was just talking about, right? My second
Right.
research experience was actually at the University of Colorado in Boulder, where I was
Mhm.
working with a professor named Dr. Robin Shandas, who he's now the chair of the biomedical engineering department at that university.
Mm.
Awesome guy. He did his PhD at University of California, San Diego, and he taught me a lot about bioengineering and how you can use physics in that space. And for that project, there I studied blood pressure comparisons by using a transducer that measures
Mhm.
your carotid artery
Mhm.
at your neck versus the blood pressure measurement you'll get from the normal pressure cuff. And the idea, of course, is your peripheral appendages, they get blood out of your heart at a different time point than at your neck. And so there might be differences in if you have different types of cardiovascular issues or issues in your body. You may not actually get accurate blood pressure readings for the person at the if you just make a measurement at their arm or a location that's further away from the heart. That's what I.
Right. I did a lot of like Swan-Ganz catheters when I did cardiac ICU. So we
That's right.
used a lot of transducers, especially when we were like deploying um, the pacemakers, transvenous pacers. A lot of them would typically need some sort of cardiac intervention. So
And,
definitely, I'm very
and
familiar with that.
and so from that experience, I learned, okay, even the idea of taking a measurement and what that measurement means now has a relative purpose. Uh, it might not be a full representative signal for the vitality of a person. And so,
Mhm.
that piqued my interest a lot and said, oh, wow, there's a need to make from this experience, I learned there's a need to actually make better tools to make measurements. And that's how I got on the track of what I do by learning about that. Oh, the blood pressure at your neck is different than at your arm, and if you're not getting the right appropriate measurement for the patient's vitals, as you mentioned, that could be some bad outcomes in their health. And so from then on, went to UCSD for my PhD in bioengineering,
Hey.
where my work was specifically in instrumentation development. The first instrument I made was actually a laser tweezer system, which is very cool. Bringing it back to my experience working on the free electron laser. And I said laser tweezer system, which I said it like everybody knows what it is. But if you watch any like sci-fi movie, Star Trek, Star Wars, they use the phrase "turn on the tractor beam," and then you see this light beam come out, and it like holds the ship in place or a person in place and brings them close to the ship, and they're trapped, right? Uh, this, of course, is not possible today, something a big object like that. But what you can do with a laser tractor beam is actually suspend small things like cells or nanoparticles. And so
Mhm.
what I did for my first project was actually make a laser tweezer system where I aligned the laser, made it fit to go into a microscope system that focused the light
Mhm.
in a way that when it interacted with a cell, it caused the cell to not move because, I mean, very simple physics principle called Schnell's law, index of refraction
Mhm.
change. So the light going through the cell, it actually, because the cell has a membrane and then there's liquid inside, the light bends ever so slightly when it goes in and
Mhm.
leaves. And that shift in the light, it's enough momentum if the power of the light beam is strong enough that it physically
Mhm.
prevents the cell from moving. And so now with that, you can do cool things. Actually, this technology, it's used now in fertility clinics to bring eggs. Some people don't have a good, easy time having kids. They try and they try and they don't.
Mhm. Mhm.
People use this laser tweezer technology to bring sperm to an egg. They then open up the egg using an ablation laser, and then they guide the sperm inside to help foster um, pregnancies. It's very interesting what you can do with laser tweezers. And so that was my first
I mean, that
project.
technology is so fascinating because I would say the most advanced, well, I did work with a lot of equipment, but the most advanced piece of technology that I was always wowed by was the Da Vinci machine.
Yep,
Because
robotic. Very cool.
exactly robotics and just how precise it could be. But what you're describing is something even more delicate that it could almost protect capillary action. Like if you had two different liquids of two different viscosities, it could just like gently separate out the two. That's fascinating. That's
And to the literal words you say, people use this technology for those purposes now. They use lasers, they use ultrasound transducers, which is of course sound. So the field of engineering is amazing. The technology we have on Earth today. I mean, if you watch the news and politics, the way we talk about stuff, you think that uh, the civilization is like 5,000 years ago because people are arguing about those same types of things even back then. But the technology we have that we're able to do stuff, it's like you can just type into YouTube now ultrasonic levitation, moving liquids with sound, and you'll see videos of people making ultrasonic transducers, DIY kits you can
But
buy
it's like
online.
access to those technologies, because they are so expensive. They're usually in very specific environments, and the question then is, because it's so beautiful that there's a representation of you working with those things. Um, for me, it's all about pathways. And I think about, like, if there was a little young David watching now, how what would be some advice or guidance you would have for a young person who would want to do what you're doing? What advice would you give them to sort of get to where you are?
Oh, sure. So I have well, his name isn't David, but I have a young one. I have a son and a daughter, and I'm trying out the advice that I'm going to share. It's called exposure. Give yourself exposure to even things you don't know, which is kind of hard to do. So my mom is a librarian, but growing up, I talk about her job in the past tense because she's thinking about retiring. But she's a librarian. She works in the library. And when I was young, after school, I either went to the youth center or the library. And so me being in the library, there's the first part. David, go help me out. Put books away. But I hated putting books away because that's manual labor. Why would I want to do that? I'm not even getting paid. It's like I can't believe my mom did that to me. But at the same time, I maybe she did it on purpose because she knows I kind of didn't like working. So I would find places to hide in the library, and because I was hiding, I'm like, well, I might as well read a book because I'm bored. And so I kind of just read a lot of books, learned about different subjects. It's not like I was thinking I want to become a MacGyver, some mad scientist, engineer guy. Let me study that stuff. Uh, I think the best path for getting to a future in the sciences is truly just fostering curiosity. Because
Mhm.
the difference between a scientist and somebody who knows what they're talking about is a
Mhm.
scientist says, I'm observing and trying to explain this phenomenon. So they don't say they know what's happening. They say, from my observation, and then they describe how they went about doing their observation. And you can only really unlock this kind of a framework for thinking about stuff if you put yourself in a curious mindset. So you can foster curiosity very easy. You don't have to say, oh, I need to know how to I want to do this, so I need to learn these methods. Most people
Mhm.
who are in the scientific discipline they're in, they fell into it. Some of them are like, well, I know I don't want to do that job, so I'll do this one. What do I have to do? I have to be curious and ask questions. Okay, I can do that. And so a lot of the professors I talk to, my contemporaries, colleagues, they all have some anecdotal story of how they got curious about something and just looked into it. So
Mm.
uh, right now, as a young person, wherever you are, learn how to learn to be curious. You're going to know your parents a lot asking questions. Why does this work like that? But you kind of already know your parents because most parents don't like paying for stuff for their kids, and you're always asking them to buy you stuff. So stop asking them to buy you certain types of things and start saying, "Hey, how does this work?" And then they'll say, "All right, here's this video, here's this YouTube, here's this laptop. Go to the right sites and learn, but ask curious questions. Learn how to be curious." Because
I
in
think
fact,
that's really good advice, because I don't, when I sit here and think about, even when I have, in the past, when I had patients well into their golden years, most people ask close ended questions. Rarely is it that in the free world encounter a lot of people who ask open-ended questions. My friends, my circle, um thinks that way because we're very inquisitive. But when I think about it, I just take like a quick mental inventory. Most people don't ask open-ended questions. I think you receive more information from the universe when you're more curious in that way. So that's a really good piece of advice.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the other point that this is my own personal philosophy. I'm not the only one who has it, but I represent that it is a philosophy that I have embraced. Um, we don't control the world around us. We're kind of interacting with it.
Hmm.
So even the premise of knowing something, that even what that means is it's a very strange consideration when you really try to unpack it. So the, we're using this cell phone. You're probably on a laptop. These are digital tools. These are digital tools that we made as people, 100% synthetic. So there's a manual that explains how it works and how you can disassemble it and reassemble it. And if you follow those instructions exactly to a T, it will work based on the instructions. We do not have this for analog systems. So we are analog systems. Even as I like my eyes. So there's this is a known fact. Women and men, we argue a lot about stuff. Uh, and it's this. I'm using of course the binary men and women gender based distinction, but to not focus on that, focus on the fact that uh, women, as classically defined, they have a larger range of hearing and sight for wavelength.
That is
So,
true.
uh, so eyeballs, they're analog, right? They're sensors. Like everything about us are sensors. I have my fingertips are sensors. If I burn the ends of my fingers, I'll no longer be able to feel stuff. My eyes, if I damage them with too much radiation or other kind of harm, I may not be able to see as well. So I wear contacts. I have corrective vision. So if I don't have my contacts in, I can't even see literally as well as somebody who has great vision. Analog systems actually aren't made equal. So when I say we have to kind of learn how to learn and be curious, uh, there's also sometimes a requirement to understand that you as an analog receiver of information, because everything about you, your senses, it's to receive information. And then with your mouth, you can, in your hands, you could do stuff with that information. But if you don't literally see the same color, like if you can't see 675, 680, that wavelength of light or beyond, then when you're talking to somebody about red, the color red, so now you're getting into it to infrared
Colorblind.
you're going to talk about it, and somebody's going to say, no, it looks very different. I don't understand why you're saying that. And if you don't have the curious mind on and you've got the I'm right mind on, you can get into a fight over literally the fact that your analog sensor is different than the other person's analog sensor. And this is really where a lot of conflict we have in the world stems from. It's I literally don't know what you're even experiencing because your sensors are different. So
This
curious
is
mind.
the first time. This is the first time in a while that I've heard someone so succinctly in a scientific way articulate why there is so much conflict on a pop culture level, an interpersonal level, layperson level. Like, how do you think we could use science and technology? I know this we're deviating a little bit, but how do you think we could use science and technology if we're aware of those differences? If we're aware, like scientifically, it's proven women have more cones. We can see more color than men can, generally speaking, and that it was so prevalent and so common that even in childhood now, when they're doing basic vision tests, they test for color blindness. And color blindness statistically is far higher in boys. So just taking, if we go with that example. So when we think about a couple when they're older and the woman's like, do you like mauve or do you like this different shade of lavender? And he's like, they're both purple, just choose one. Like,
Yeah.
how do we, are there technologies being developed to help bridge those gaps? Or I understand that it would be more about emotional intelligence to bridge that gap of range. So someone to have the empathy to say, oh, they don't have the cones that I have, so they won't notice the nuance and difference in shades that I can. So we'll just have to agree to disagree, or I have to make the decision myself. Instead of they're not paying attention to detail. What would you say as a scientist? Like, is there technology that's helped bridging that gap at this moment in time, or?
Well, you can take it as an example. So I have an iPhone. Not I'm not saying Apple's the best. I just happen to have bought into that ecosystem. But I see commercials now for a Google phone. I forget the name, but they actually in their advertisement they cite our camera. We have made it in a way that we are able to amplify signal that other cameras will neglect. And so, where does this come in? I have darker skin tone than other people, and so darker skin tones, depending on the camera settings, they you know, when you take a picture of something dark, if you don't have a good exposure and process the image well, you're just going to get something that you don't have good contrast with, because you need contrast to see things, and certain lights reflect better off of lighter skin tones than others. And so this is just the way light interacts with material. It has nothing to do with the object that's having a picture taken of. And so with this new Google phone, they correct for this flaw, this physical happenstance. So now you can see darker toned images with the contrast that you'll actually see with your real eyes, because the camera doesn't do what your brain does for correcting for issues. That's one of the challenges with certain technology we have. But on that point, to your question, it requires us to take tools that exist and build into it the knowledge of these differences. So, being that I'm in the healthcare space, there's lots of conversations of how you can use artificial intelligence, machine learning, like digitized tools to help with stuff. And one big controversy is, radiologists. They look at medical images to make decisions on: do you have cancer? Is your bone broken? Is it a fracture? What kind of fracture? They look at X-ray images. They look at ultrasound data. They look at MRI images, right? And they do their interpretation. So some people believe computers could do it better and just have the computer do that. And some doctors are like, that's absurd. Computers will never have the same insight as people. And so I'm on the side of the doctors, saying, yeah, computers are synthetic things that we train to do stuff for us. We should probably never think that they'll ever. We don't know how the world works, but we're training computers to do stuff. It may never be as smart as we are. And so I say that to say, if we can train AI to help us teach ourselves better to learn and factor in these nuanced differences, then we can address a new phrase that is coming up in some academic circles called neurodiversity. Because we're diverse, we all have a different analog sensors. Our brain is an analog sensor. It takes in information and processes it, and then it gives an output. Very fascinating how it does it. We're still learning. But with that recognition that, well, if people have different sensors, then that means they probably aren't even receiving the same information the same way. So you could calibrate for that. There could be simple assessments to quickly understand how do you take in information and then auto calibrate, and then the information that's presented to you is in the same fashion that another person would get. So you could have now parity of information. Because really, fighting over a hue difference, what do you say, mauve versus taupe? Yeah, that's all purple to me, or whatever that color is. I don't even know what those are. But literally, people fight over that type of stuff because we as people, once you take a little bit more understanding of our psychology, we are like our closest friends on Earth, mammals. We are animals. We have emotion. We're emotional creatures, even more so than some of our other mammal friends. So I always like to tell people, humans have the capacity to use logic, but we're actually more emotional. And when I say capacity to use logic, there's no like statistical information out there that can disprove my comment. But I say, at the best of us probably have 30 to 35% capability of using logic, like the smartest person on earth, but we are way more emotional, which is why the smart person who demonstrates their intellect in any field, you can poke them in their shoulder and they will get mad at you and yell emotionally. And it's like, you're so smart. Why are you acting erratic? I just poked you. And because you got into my personal, they blow up, right? That's an emotional response. The smartest person. So just imagine.
Logic and emotions are actually inverse operations.
If you don't know how to use your emotions, you can convert your. I mean, you can make your whole body go in the same direction, or you can have your body go in different directions. We have two arms. If you hold on to two car doors and the cars are moving in opposite directions, if you don't let go, you're gonna have a problem, right?
Don't
You
do
can
that.
no, but quite literally, by our. I mean, I see this. I see in you go to like a circus and you see different people do certain types of contortion acts, juggling, or amazing acrobatics, unhuman like stuff. It's like, how did they train their body to do that? Like,
Hmm.
I don't know if I saw. If there are people who have like an ability to move their upper ear because they have control over the muscles there. Some people they can move their eyebrows in a certain way. I can't do that. But the people who can, either it's just by their natural, they just had it and they knew how to use it up front, or they trained their body, they trained themselves to control their bodies to do stuff. And so to the point I'm making, learning to learn translates to learning how to control. And we literally have some people on this planet, they have heightened their sense of understanding how to hear. So they can hear things
Hmm.
way farther away than what a typical person can hear. It's like, how did you hear that? And it's like, well, I mean, you got the same ears. Oh, you didn't train yourself to calibrate to get rid of the noise and then pick up on signals. It's all about learning how to learn. And of
You know
course,
what? You're sort of getting at something. Almost every discussion I have usually gets back to this. It's like nature versus nurture, almost in a way. Like you're born with the talent. So let's take singing, for example. Some people naturally just come out singing. Some people need vocal lessons to help get them to that level. Some people sound like the cat on a chalkboard. Um, when we're saying learning,
I'm a great singer, right? Who's gonna who's gonna fix that problem? Ah, T-Pain, put me in. No.
so when we're talking about learning how to learn, that's very interesting. But I could see that being the case to heighten your sense of hearing to the point where you can hear what would statistically be defined as better. I wonder if the same is true for vision or our other senses.
Yeah, all of them. I mean, yeah.
Hmm.
Well, my son he takes taekwondo. It's a martial art out of Korea, martial science. There's lots of so if you never study any martial art or understand the principles of martial science and how you can use your body to do things, uh,
Hmm.
and then you come across somebody who has studied a martial art to a certain degree, and you try to engage in combat with them. Uh, One person tends to always lose, and the other one statistically always wins. Because if you train your body to react and move in a way that you are able to leverage somebody else's momentum against them, like you throw a punch, right? I'm I'm throwing it out to you. If I have trained myself for years on how to quickly grab your arm and move in the direction that you're moving in, and I just sidestep you slightly, meaning you're punching me, I move away from your arm, and then I move with you, I add to your momentum, I will send you flying in the direction your arm was going. And there are people who do that. I mean, you just watch any Jackie Chan movie or Jet Li, and you see people train themselves to be experts at using biophysical momentum to their advantage. That's really what.
But see, that's like the musculoskeletal system and your proprioception. I wonder about like if we're talking about training your hearing, I don't know if I can make my cochlea function
Oh, it's the
better.
same. It's the same thing.
Hmm.
I mean, well, typically people who practice these types and work in these fields, they can punch faster. They can punch more accurate. They're still just using their arm. It's not like so. What's your arm? It's a bunch of tendons and ligaments, and it's cells working together in some way, right?
Hmm.
There's a reason why your ears, which is also kind of the same stuff, can't be heightened because really, what is sound anyway, right? You got some little thing flapping in your ear that's converting a mechanical wave into an electrical signal that your brain processes. So, really, all we're talking about for hearing Now, granted, there are people who have damaged uh, bodily tissue. So if it's non-functioning to a degree, you can only use your instrument to some point. But if it's not damaged, really what we're talking about is being able to pick up lighter and smaller vibrations and converting those smaller signals into an electrical signal that your brain understands. That's all we're talking about. It's amplifying signal to noise. So as you concentrate, as you focus, you can actually increase perception, which is not what we're talking about. And people do this all the time. It's very I mean, I'm making it sound very simple. Of course, I'm not saying that I can do this, but it's the act of what's happening is still merely learning how to learn, being curious, understanding how to control. And as I mentioned before, where do you go? There are lots of books that have this information. There are people who have this information you could seek out. I mean,
and you know what? My mind is open to it. I guess I've always just I'm shifting my frame of perception of the senses. I know that they can be heightened. I've heard of sense deprivation, and of course, I've seen multiple studies of people when you lose one sense, the other ones amplify themselves in order to compensate for the loss of another sense. So I'm not surprised that it can be done. I guess I just never thought of training yourself specifically to hear at higher frequencies. And I think I personally shy away from that because I have super sensitive hearing. Like my hearing is like I sleep in silence because especially after working in the ICU for so long, like where there's an overabundance of sounds, it's like I need that decompression to like
and, and I'm not trying to sound super spacey and like, oh my god, there's people who are like doing superhuman things or whatever. There are
no, believe it
people
though.
who are doing
I believe that.
they're doing very practical stuff like hunters and trackers for like animals. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you go out into the remote areas of Alaska or certain parts of Northern America, and you want to go hunting for a creature. Depending on how you move, how you make noise in the environment, even the act of walking, those creatures, they can sense your vibration for inner, and so they know and they run off. So people, they learn how to walk different. They learn how to actually hear the sound of the animal, even despite the fact that there's a stream nearby. You hear birds chirping. You hear, you can hear the leaves, the wind blowing through the leaves. People who track and hunt, they train themselves to do that. It's pretty amazing to me. I can't do that. I don't go hunting, but my brother, he was a ranger in the army. He talked to me about all kinds of stuff they were doing. Another cousin of mine, he described, he came to my wife and I's wedding in Jamaica, and he said, "Oh, David, watch this. Look at that at night." He said, "Look at that. Look at the lights that you could see now that the sun's gone down, and we're in the middle of nowhere. There's no light pollution. Look at that light." And I looked at him and I said, "Man, how much rum did you have, cuz? Because what are you talking about?" And he looked at him and he said, "Oh, that's right. You didn't get training on this. You can't see it." And then he pointed and he said, "Okay, look right there." And I looked at him like, "Oh, wait. What?" He's like, "It's been there the whole time. You just aren't, you're not focusing because it's anyway, back to the point of be curious. You have to be curious about the world. It's most important. You also have to know that you have the capacity and capability to learn. Because I do talk to a lot of people about what I do, and they're like, "Oh man, you must be really smart. I can't do physics. I can't do math." And I'm like, "But you're talking to me. I don't know. What do you mean you can't do it?" And they're like, "Yeah, talking is very different than that stuff." And I'm like, "Au contraire. It's all language. Everything is language. How you use it. So if you embrace it like a language, then you'll be able to interact with it like a language." I happen to have I haven't always been a computer programmer. Actually, I mean, my dad brought home a computer in 1992. First time I had a computer in my house. You know, not everybody gets that experience, but I had a computer in my house, and I'm like, "What is that?" My dad's like, "Oh, it's a computer." And I went, like a TV. Okay, got it. And then I didn't do anything with it. And then the internet came out, American Online, AOL or whatever. And I'm
Yep.
like, internet, what's that? It's like, oh, you go to the computer, you type stuff in, and then you could see stuff. And I'm like, okay, type. Because, I mean, nope. I'm being very, very silly with how I'm describing this, but literally, like a car. Everybody, at some point, if you drive, you had to learn how to drive a car. If you use it, you had to learn how to type. You had to learn how to use the tool. Physics is a tool, and it's written, a tool that uses the language of math to describe the world around us. That's all physics is. Everybody does physics all the time. If you stand in front of somebody who's throwing a baseball, you see them throw the ball, your eyes automatically know that if you don't move, depending on how that ball is coming at you, you're gonna get hit. That's you're using your eyes to see physics in action, right? Now, what physics does is it helps you translate what you are witnessing into something that you can now harness. So there are equations that describe, after somebody throws a ball, the rate at which the ball is going to travel, because the rate at which the ball is going to travel is known, velocity, and it's known where the ball is thrown. So if we're on the moon versus on Earth, when that ball lands after thrown, it's going to be different. The gravity is different. People, they over time, people observed this and said, oh, there's a way for us to characterize that. And now that we have these equations, most of them came from, Isaac Newton and Cavendish after they really optimized in Leibniz. I'm probably butchering their names, but whatever. I'm not. I never said I was great at saying people's names. I know I could reference some of the people, but they learned how to describe things, and based on those descriptions, and of course, math is a global thing too. That's the other thing I learned studying. A lot of people, they shy away from certain subjects because they think the subject has a certain cultural affiliation. Every single earthling, every ethnicity, every gender has influenced the language of math and how it interacts with our lives today. So we all have a place in human invention because it's humans that made it, and we're all human. It ain't no, so that's the other thing that I always like to cite for science, because science is, as you go higher and higher in it, it does tend to skew less people of at least African American descent, also American or Hispanic, and that's of course a lot due to just circumstances and interest in going into the field. So for my part, I tell everybody, there's a lot of money in this field. Get in it. It's not easy. Get in it. There's no reason that you're not in it. It's easier for you to become a millionaire doing physics than it is for you to play the lottery and become a millionaire. Get into the space, because all you're doing is using human invention to continue human ingenuity. That's what we're doing, right? So there's a need for somebody to figure out. Actually, I live in Tampa, Florida area. These lightning strikes around here are crazy. Like I came from California here. If you ever see lightning strike the ground and you're like walking on a crosswalk, and the lightning struck the ground on the crosswalk where you're at, you're like, wait a minute. So the reason that lightning didn't hit me is luck. I mean, like, because there's no reason why lightning, it's like, nobody controls lightning, right? The amount of energy inside of one bolt of lightning, it can power cities. We don't know how to harness lightning. It's a naturally occurring thing. There's energy in the sky. We're not using it. We need scientists to get in the field, figure out how to harness that. Global warming is gone immediately. Oh, geez, that's silly. Why don't you make that expensive solar panel? You can just use the energy in the air to power it, right? Because lightning is energy in the air. It's using energy in the air, right?
That's true.
Why don't we just use that, right? Somebody's going to figure that out, because, like, literally, if everybody sees lightning on Earth, it's like one of us is going to figure out how to harness it. Tesla.
I mean, isn't that sort of what the legacy of Tesla?
That's
What's
right.
it about?
Yeah, he's got some ideas on it. 0 point energy. That's more or less what the subject we're talking about is. But I don't want to go down the rabbit holes of all these. Like, there are people who are really really smart and came up with ideas of their time. Meaning, Tesla had ideas on lightning and how to harness energy, but he never had any idea that I would be able to talk to you on a cell phone, and as if like so his mind was limited to everything around him. What I'm saying is now, because of all this advanced technology, people can see stuff and understand how to interact with it way better than they could in the past. More people need
Mm.
to get in the field of sciences, and it's very welcoming. Uh, so get in. Why not? That's my advice to
And that's
everyone.
to
Quit what
double
you're doing
back
now. Become a
briefly.
scientist.
Well, the double back briefly, you were touching on the RAS. One of my mentors taught me about that, the reticular activating system, where if you're not aware of something, you don't notice it initially, but once you're aware of it, it's like you see it everywhere.
That's
you
right.
know so it's like, okay, well, now I see the North Star, now I'm aware of it, so every time I go outside at night, now I see it every time, unless it's cloudy or something like that. But yes, that's alluding to what you were talking about with as far as heightening your senses. So to apply that would be dope. And then so as we sort of close this out, what is one piece of technology or one theory that you're looking forward to using more? What's something you have not yet done in your career that you're looking forward to doing?
Oh, that's a great question. So what I am looking forward to working on at some point in time, like I mentioned briefly, there's new methods to do ultrasonic levitation. We're using uh, ultrasonic transducers to uh, create certain types of phenomenon where you can suspend things in air, like
Hmm.
water, like objects, based on them interacting with sound waves. Because you can make sound, you can form sound and shape it in a similar way that you can shape light from a laser, like a flashlight. Like, think about a flashlight. You can
Hmm.
set it so that it fans out and the light goes everywhere, or you can
Hmm.
change it so that it focuses to a fine point. We can do the same thing with sound. So I'm looking forward to harnessing some futuristic kind of technology that actually allows the ability to digitize touch. And by that I mean, right now you can see my face, you can hear my voice, but as I put my hand close to the camera, you just see it
Hmm.
coming close to the camera. Like, why is that guy doing that? There are future use cases of these uh, sound focusing technology where we're going to be able to digitize touch and actually transmit our physical gestures through the internet, where it goes on one side and comes out on the other through a transducer, and you can actually engage with people and have more immersive video conferencing or things like that.
Hmm.
And so I'm looking forward to working with groups on using this type of technology for like physical therapy or other types of sports training and exercise, where you can quite literally. You mentioned the robotic surgery before. That's where a doctor, he's doing something a ways away, but he's operating a robot system. So he's controlling a joystick and he's controlling a robot. Actually, here's a company that is actually starting to work on this. It's called Blazing Audio.
Hmm.
And the point of the company is to integrate and harness these new technologies that exist, which is also a good thing to learn as a scientist. You don't always have to make yourself. You don't have to discover yourself. You can
Hmm.
ride and use the the knowledge generated by others, because that's what science is about. Creating new knowledge in engineering, which is why I'm a bioengineer. I'm not just like a scientist. I harness invention and knowledge to solve problems.
Hmm.
So here's a great example of companies like Ultraleap. They're based in the UK.
Hmm.
Academic researchers out of Japan, Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh.
Hmm.
I'm not going to mention all of the universities, but there's lots of active research on human haptics, how you can convert electrical signals into signals that people recognize for touch and feel. One group, they focused on using ultrasound to create haptic feedback. And now there are companies like Ultraleap. There's a company called Emerge. they're harnessing this technology to like allow you to play chess. So you could pick up the chess pieces. They're not there. You could see them with augmented reality, but you're feeling the pieces, and
Mhm.
you can play with a person a million miles away. On this, I guess a million miles away would get them right back to you because we don't have a million miles of distance on this planet, but
Mhm.
thousands of miles away. We'll go with that. Uh, the other side of Earth, and you can play chess as if they're present. You can knock over their pieces. They'll get mad at you. This is like technology that we can use now. It's just a matter of integrating it. So that's kind of what I work on and do. I help integrate novel technology to solve human health problems. And this is one thing I'm
I'm
really
so,
excited about working.
I'm so excited for that. I was going to say I could think of a couple of examples of that on a very low level. I was thinking about haptic feedback on the cell phone, like feeling each time you touch and move a text around, or even an optometrist office during your optometry exam, you can feel the puff of air on the eye as it's measuring pressure and things like that. And from that, it's able to gauge your eye health. Um,
Yeah, that's right.
Also, different pieces of equipment for visually impaired people. They've come so far from just braille is all they had back in the day to now there's different air pressurized and sensorized pieces of equipment for them. So I'm super curious to follow along in your journey
Yeah,
and see how this technology evolves, especially with that company being invested in metaverse. I love metaverse technology. I'm really curious to see how pieces of equipment like the Oculus and other companies' equipment as well evolves. I'm super curious to see where that goes. What is a piece of advice that you would leave aspiring scientists with? If you could sum that up.
travel. Make sure you travel. Don't get stuck in the books. Go to where the books talk about. You got to travel. See the world. It's a very beautiful place. A lot of people. Well, uh, life is not. My dad gave me this advice when I was very young, and I take it to heart. He said, "I work to take care of my lifestyle. My work is not my lifestyle." A lot of people that get maybe too passionate about the work they do, that they
Mhm.
forget the glorious earth that we're on and the amazing things to see. So,
Mhm.
but now I travel, I see stuff, informs my work.
Mhm.
Stuff I didn't know about. Oh, well, and this is actually a lot of invention comes this way. People travel to different parts of the Amazon or, just on a plane flying somewhere. And they're like, oh, wow, the way that liquid streaked across the window, that's exactly this problem I was trying to solve.
Mhm.
This is how discovery happens. It's seeing the world. So scientists travel, but everybody should travel too. One of my colleagues, his name's Ken Bright. I jokingly
Mhm.
tell him every teacher should be a physicist, and every student should learn physics first before you learn anything else, because then everything becomes a lot easier to understand. Because physics is
Mhm.
a language of math, understanding natural phenomena. So, oh, I'm having an argument with you. It's like, no, actually, I'm hearing sound waves coming at me and I can't process them. My wife laughs at me when I say that to her. She's like, but yeah, my advice is make sure you're able to travel. And
Yeah.
traveling isn't getting on a plane and spending a lot of money to go somewhere. Traveling
Mhm.
can be going to the other part of your town. If a lot of people when I lived in San Diego, that's where I did my PhD. Uh, I would go visit friends in LA, and I would meet people that are their friends in LA. And so I'm not from California. I moved there only for grad school. So I would meet people. They're like, "Oh, what part of LA are you from?" And I'm like, "I'm not from LA." They're like, "Really? Where are you from?" And then I would explain. They're like, "Oh, well, I've never been there." And I'm like, "Okay, have you been to San Diego?" And they're like, "Nope." And I'm like, "Wait, but it's only an hour and a half away if you speed. It's a little, and there's no traffic. Otherwise, it's a lot farther. By time, it's a lot longer away." But uh, they say, "Oh, I've never had a reason to go down there." And I'm like, "But there's SeaWorld. There's a lot of other stuff. What are you talking about?" So yeah, I think it's funny. You don't have to get on a plane to go anywhere. You can get in a car. You can take a bus or a train. But just make sure you travel. See other
I
stuff.
agree. That's one of my initiatives as I continue working towards a few things that I'm doing to let a little bit of the cat out of the bag one thing I really want to achieve within the scope of my life is making sure that as many young people as possible have access to passports as early as possible and they get to see this world so that their frame of mind is not relegated to just where they were born. I actually lived in Kearney Mesa for a bit when I was working at UCSD. And I worked at UCSF, UCLA, and UCSD. So I've been everywhere that you've been in Cali. Um, so I totally know that's such a beautiful state. California is gorgeous. But thank you so much, David. I think you've given a lot of great advice and advisement today. Anyone watching, definitely reach out, connect with David. I tell everybody, time to revamp your LinkedIn. Hop on LinkedIn. You can definitely reach out to him. I'll pull up his page. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out. There we go.
Yep. And all my friends, after they get to know me, they jokingly say, I can be a scientist because you're doing it. So that's the other point. Everybody can do it. I'm an example. I was not always a scientist, and now I am one. So you can also do it. My friends get a kick out of making that comment because they're like, yeah, I remember when you weren't a physicist, you were really dumb. And you're still dumb, but you can do other stuff, which is amazing. It's like I confused their brain. It's like, how can you not make the order correct, but you can do this complex engineering? And I'm like, I don't know. I wasn't, I'm one of those kind of people. So
He's brilliant. Don't listen to him. Oh, before I go, there's about 5 events that I'm going to before the end of the year. The Blackest Technology Conference. This Sunday I need to be in Atlanta for it's the Black Amazon launching of their platform and dinner, which is really cool. I'm thinking of going to Tech Beach in Jamaica, and then Afro Tech in Austin in November. I found that, yeah. So I'll definitely shoot you all of those. But as of now, do you have any events or things that you're going to coming up?
I do. So I mentioned my the job that pays me, but I also work in an academic congress called the Advancing Electrokinetic Science, the Advancing Electrophoresis Society, AES Society for short. It's an academic congress that focuses on really teaching and proselytizing the benefits of microfluidics and electric field theory to solve problems. I'm the vice president of the organization, so I attend these conferences like that every year. There's another kind of microfluidics conference called MicroTOS. These are like they're open for anybody to go to. There's some fee that you may have to pay, but the goal is to specifically get undergraduates who have interest in going to grad school. They may not know what they want to work on. There's so much stuff. There's so much stuff we need to discover, and so there's always stuff that you can study. I help proselytize and kind of guide people to also consider using electric field theory and microfluidics to learn stuff about the world. And so this is a conference I'm going to be attending. I'll be going to those culture shifting events, the one in New York City, as well as the one in London. I've got some. I'm going to be meeting with a professor. That's the cool part about my job. Also, that my physics professor, Dr. Helmy, she literally told me, David, you can unlock the world by studying physics. You can go everywhere. You can interact with so many different types of people because the world is physics. So there's a work, and so I work with people from different countries. I go visit them and things of this nature. So literally, I'm going there for a conference, but I also am going to be doing work. So.
How cool is that? Yeah, I did see that they had London and New York. I'm going to the Miami one. I miss London so much. I stayed in Brixton for a month and it was so amazing. The little flat I was in was on top of this restaurant that had the best, it was like lamb ramen or something. It was crazy. But but this has been amazing, David. I could talk to you forever because I love having cerebral conversations. It's so refreshing to me. But I think the work that you do is amazing. I think you are such a positive influence and an amazing representation of what applied energy can really be. And I'm looking forward to watching your career continue to bloom and grow. And I'd love to pick your brain again someday.
Sounds good. Well, I'm available. Let's have a follow-up talk sometime. Cheers.
All righty. Have a good one.